And she says, oh, you didn't know. Didn't you see they have different colored suits on? So he's wearing brown, which means he's on death row. And that was when I realized that there's no limit to people's freedom of thought. That guy could say all of that and have all of that feeling about life and all of that clarity. He's not angry and he's not getting out. He's dying in there. And that just showed me, like, there is no limit to this. And I learned in that moment that I had made exceptions in my head. Hi. Okay. Great.
So welcome to our little home. We wanted to begin by sharing an Abraham Lincoln quote, you've probably heard it, which is that if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening it. And so we want to kind of use that as a frame for how we're going to approach tonight. So we're going to spend the first probably 90 minutes or so sharpening the mind, sharpening the eyes through which we're going to take a look at the world, sharing a way of understanding the mind, creativity, problem solving, the world, that if we can get on something resembling the same page about that, when we look back out at the world, there's a very good chance from our experience that we're going to see things that we have not seen before. And when we see things we have not seen before, that opens up the possibility of seeing things we haven't seen before. So we're going to ask your indulgence in that. So for the first part, we're going to stay very focused on a conversation about how the mind works, how perception works, how we see the world, how the world occurs to us. And then we will open the conversation out to explore the world itself. Yeah?
Yeah. It's interesting because it's I'm very excited to have this conversation tonight because it feels, just for me, like big, and things that are big feel alternatively scary and exciting. Like, and what I mean by that is that I know that since I've begun exploring this understanding of the mind that we share with people called the three principles, it has become increasingly clear to me that this understanding of the mind simplifies what humans are dealing with to such a degree that I think it could solve anything. I really do. And I've seen in my work with all different kinds of people, from individuals to families to large multi-million-dollar organizations to government bodies to military to sports teams, that this understanding of the mind seems to so simply unlock something that frees people up and allows them to have a better experience of life across the board, that brings them more peace of mind and more well-being, which I think the world is looking for on many levels, and also allows them to access new ideas that give them new perceptions of the world, so that the reality they thought that they were dealing with doesn't look the same anymore. You get a whole different understanding of reality, and so you can do things that you couldn't do in the old reality. So there's this amazing potential that comes alive for people that I've seen in the work that I've been doing over the last 11 years, sharing this understanding with people, is that not only do they feel better, and that makes them better versions of themselves to everyone they come in contact with, but they also see a new world, and so things become possible that weren't possible in their old world. And the more I've seen that, and the different kinds of clients I've worked with, and I've seen it ripple out in organizations amongst thousands of people, and people will literally say, like, we just got a quote from this amazing restaurant group we worked with in London, because they wrote an article about our work in a paper, and they wanted a quote from one of our clients, and they said, since we've learned these principles, the world does not look the same. And because the world doesn't look the same, we're able to do things we couldn't do before. And I thought that's just the perfect summary of what a different understanding of the mind could do for the world. And if it can do it for a business that owns a bunch of restaurants, it could do it for a government, it could do it for countries, it could do it for the world. And I keep getting that feeling as I do this work. My God, this really does solve everything. But I never thought to really, not that I never thought, I just never really imagined that you could go, well, if it really could solve everything, let's talk about that. Yeah. Let's look at it at that
level.
Should
we do it? Should we solve everything?
Yeah,
I mean, as long as we're here.
Other than the fact that I sound crazy or naive or arrogant, let's put all that aside, because I really do feel in my soul like I've seen something that I can't unsee. And I really want to see the possibility of how far we can take that. And I think it really does start by just having conversations like this. Like, could you really change the world in 2 hours? Like, it sounds playful, and it is. And we don't really know the answer. That's why it was a question. But we'd love to try.
You know, my wife and my son and I were having I haven't told you this, we were having a conversation about, well, how do we change the world? All right, let's figure this out. And my wife said, well, I know it sounds silly, but if we all just loved each other a little bit more, and my son and I agreed that she did sound silly, and my son, who's, you know, senior at university and, you know, has that fighting spirit, he said, no, we need to educate people. We need to go out, we need to educate people. That's the way to do it. And I said, well, I think we need to raise the consciousness of people. And then as we talked about it further, we realized that actually we were all saying the same thing. Those weren't three different answers. That, in fact, if we did love each other a little bit more, that would raise our consciousness. Love brings an education with it. Right? When you're not seeing the world through the pre-existing judgments, when you're seeing it through the eyes of love, you see it clean. You don't see it better than it is. You don't see it worse than it is. You just see it as it is. And that opens something new up. If people are educated about how life works, how the mind works, what's really going on, not what's really going on here or there, but what's really going on here in the human system, it opens up new possibilities. If people are able to be at their best more of the time, and know enough not to do damage when they're not at their best. If there's a quote at the beginning of my book from Syd Banks, who's sort of the guy who first articulated the principles that we're going to be talking about this evening, that if the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. We don't look clean because we're too scared to look. In my old life, I used to cure phobias for a living. And those of you who've seen my TED Talk, Why Aren't We Awesomer? I share some stories about that. And one of the things about curing a phobia, taking away a phobia, eliminating a phobia, is that people then had to learn how to deal with the thing they used to have the phobia of. Because if you have a phobia of snakes, you never need to learn which snakes are safe and which ones aren't. If you have a phobia of heights, you never need to learn how close to the edge you can safely get, because you're never going anywhere near that edge. If you have a phobia of whatever you have a phobia of, you never see it, because what you see in your head is so vivid that you literally just can't get any feedback about the world around you. Well, we live in a world where people have a phobia about their own experience. They're too scared to look at, oh, I don't want to feel that. Or that feeling feels so overwhelming that they immediately put it out onto whatever it looks like coincides with its existence. You walked into the room just before I felt angry. It must be you! Right? And we do that. We project it onto the world, and then we defend ourselves, protect ourselves against that world. Not seeing that before we projected that onto the world was just fine. And so one of the things that we want to do through the conversation this evening is is take some of the fear out of the system so that we can have a fresh look and we can see, well, where is the edge? Like, how close could we actually get to the edge safely? In a conversation, in our own thinking, in action. And when we start to do that, of course, a whole new range of opportunities and possibilities show up.
One of the things that I realized that is so simple but so easy to miss, that I think is like number one in terms of sharpening the axe, is that we humans have gotten so used to living in what we created, we forgot we created it. Because we're doing it all the time and it's so automatic and it's been happening since the birth of humankind. So we don't see that the world we live in is just a reflection of the thinking we've had so far. So we kind of talk about the world as if it's this other thing that already existed before we got here. Like in a way that it had nothing to do with us. And we're like, what are we going to do about that darn world thing? Or what are we going to do about the education system? Or what are we going to do about the economy? Or what are we going to do about terrorism? Or what are we going to do about, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about, you know, my job? What are we going to do about this relationship? And it's one of the most interesting things, I think, as people start to learn about the mind, is that as humans, we're basically living in a massive painting of our own creation. Like, this is our artwork. And I think, actually, New York City is one of the most magnificently, overwhelmingly massive demonstrations of this, is that everything out there, so anyone who took the subway here, took a taxi here, walked down the street here, there's buildings everywhere, there's shops, there's cars, there's smells, there's noises. Every single one of those came from an idea someone had. Isn't that weird? like the stuff in this room we made, and we get so used to sitting in it and just assuming it's going to be here that we kind of forget that we had something to do with it getting here. So that's one of the first things that I think is really intriguing, just to kind of take a step back and before we get into anything, kind of consider what it is we'd be getting into in a conversation about the world and how do you change the world. And I think for starters, we have to be reminded that we are the world. Is that a song?
I immediately heard it's at the very least a song cue. No, okay.
I don't mean it like that, but I do mean it like that. But no, we are the world, and it is so intriguing to me to appreciate the vastness of that, even though it's so invisible. It's not where we're used to looking. But I'll give you a smaller example. Like, we were hired to work for a company, and the class that they wanted us to teach was called Leading from Within. And the idea was that when you walked into this organization, it was a very hierarchical, multi-tiered organization. It was very big. And one of the problems was people were getting very apathetic about the state of the company, and morale was low. There was a lot of complaining. There was a lot of undermining. So people weren't really working together. So as you can imagine, the state of the company was just going like this. And one of the most interesting things when we sat down with this team of 35 or something or other managers and asked them to talk to us about what their work life was like, they spent a lot of time talking about the culture and how bad it was, and talking about the leadership and the management and how bad it was. And it was all about all of the problems out there. And it was so interesting that after just a few days of kind of highlighting, well, actually, you're not experiencing a culture. And you're not even experiencing a leader or leadership. You're experiencing your mind's interpretation of those things, your mind's projection of those things. And as we spent a few days kind of pointing them in the direction of, look, you can't see a world without your own thinking. So it's really, everything is kind of a reflection of your own thinking. It was really intriguing because people immediately started saying things like, yeah, how come I haven't done something about the fact that I hate the layout of the office? Like, who's going to change that if I don't change it? And how come I haven't done this? And how come I haven't done that? And it was so beautiful to watch. By the end, they all felt like, shit, I'm the culture. If I don't like it, why don't I change it? And they could totally see the part that they had in it. Like, oh yeah, if we're all sitting around whining, that's going to feel like not a fun place to work. I guess I'm a player in this game here called my job. And it's so interesting, like, that is so tempting for people to forget that they're the world they live in, like the culture, the job, the feeling, your feeling of your existence and what's possible comes from your own thinking. And it's so easy to put that outside ourselves and go, wasn't me, was here before I got here. I had nothing to do with it. And I know for me, I felt that way. Like, I felt that way about my family until I learned these principles. Oh yeah, that's just my family. We're messed up in these ways. Has nothing to do with me. I'm just doing the best I can with this crazy thing called my family. And it was so intriguing to me when I realized I'm not experiencing my family. I'm experiencing my own thought. And that shows up as a projection that I call my family. And oh my God, when my thinking changed, I felt like I got a whole new family, particularly a new father. But I had so much thinking that dynamic and that feeling in our household was somehow already there before I got there. Oh, this is our household. And it was so fascinating for me to learn about my mind, such that when I got a new thought, I got a new dad. And I got a new household, and and it was so fascinating, that piece to me, that my own role in it went from so completely invisible, and I would have sworn hand on a Bible that it had nothing to do with me, to, oh my God, it had everything to do with me. And when I changed, it seemed to change.
You ever seen a bank heist movie where the I'm actually the one in my head is the one with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Sean Connery, but it's in a lot of movies where the alarm triggers are these invisible layers, and so they spray it, and then you can suddenly see the lasers, and so they can avoid them. Well, that's kind of like what we're going to be talking about. What we're actually beginning to talk about is, what are the invisible forces at play? That because they're invisible, we don't notice them. We bump into them. We set off the alarms left, right, and center. Whereas if they were visible, we could work with them. We could avoid them where they need to be avoided and use them where they're available to be used. And that's actually was one of the next book that I'm working on for next year. One of the possible subtitles that we're working with is making the invisible visible to make the impossible possible. Because when you see what is available to you but usually unseen, suddenly you have the opportunity to put it to use. And the most unseen force in the universe is the creative force, is what we're going to be talking about as thought. Right? Thought creates. The physicist David Bohm said, thought creates the world, and then says, I didn't do it. Right? That's what Mara's pointing to, is we create a world. It seems like a thing, but it's not a thing. You can't put it in a wheelbarrow. Right? You could theoretically put the planet Earth in a wheelbarrow if you had a big enough wheelbarrow. But you can't put the world that we suffer from in a wheelbarrow.
The state of the world.
You can't put the state of the world in a wheelbarrow. Well, if you can't put it in a wheelbarrow, it's made of thought. And when we start to see that it's made of thought, the nice thing about things made of thought is thought can change in a heartbeat. Thought can probably change faster than a heartbeat. And so suddenly the world becomes a more fluid creation. It is no longer a fixed force that has to be reckoned with. You can't put terrorism in a wheelbarrow. You could put a terrorist in a wheelbarrow and give him a wheelbarrow ride, I guess. But right, you can't put terrorism. You can't put education in a wheelbarrow. You can't put anything that you suffer from in a wheelbarrow, because we suffer from thought-created realities. But we don't see the bit where we create them. We just see what gets created and we try to reckon with it. But because it seems fixed, then it feels like there's a lot of work to do. And it feels like, how many of you, when you think about the problems of the world, feel at least some of the time pretty hopeless? Yeah, I would expect that. Me too. When I think about the problems of the world as I have created them unwittingly and innocently in thought, I feel really daunted sometimes. In the same way as if I created a really scary monster out of clay, and then like a 10-foot tall monster, Godzilla monster out of clay, put it in the corner of the room, went out, forgot, came back drunk, never happens, but I mean, if it did, and go, ah, right? It's like that. We don't see the process of creating most of the time because we're not looking there. I have a friend who's one of the world champion close-up magicians. And he would never tell me how he does any of his tricks, but he did tell me the secret of magic, which I did not know. Do you want to know the secret of magic, kids?
Finally.
All right. So the secret of magic is not, according to the world champion, at least at the time, close-up magician, it's not the hand moving faster than the eye. It's the hand moving before the eye is looking. Almost every magic trick happened before you walked into the room. It happened before you knew you were watching a magic trick. It's in the setup. Well, it's the same with thought. Thought is the ultimate magic trick. And because we're used to looking at the effect of thought, we never see the trick. But what we would love to do with you tonight is just start to look before the trick happens. Start to look at where the trick comes from. Does that make sense as an analogy? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try to explain what I think of, for me, as the two things that, when they were revealed as part of the setup, it brought a new world for me.
And you're like the Penn and Teller of the mind. Can I be the mute one? Because you're doing great.
No. So, and again, this is the sharpening of the axe part, where I can explain it on an individual level, but again, like I was saying, people forget that the individual is the global. So it's going to sound like it's just, or maybe it's not, but I can explain it very clearly for me, and then we can elaborate from there, and then you can start to hopefully see why we would, crazily suggest that this would be a solution to the world's problems. So, that one's just not doing it for me. Okay. So, when I first came to learn these principles, I'm going to explain them in a second. What it did is it flopped something very big on its head for me, which is basically the way I constructed my understanding of reality. So, before I learned the principles I'm going to explain in a moment, I would have told you that here's life, or another way of saying that would be the world. But in a way, it was like, the stuff out here, life, the world, that whole thing that we're all in. So I had that going on. And then that did its thing. So things happened in the world, things happened in life, and then I got affected by those things, right? So if someone was mean to me, then I got upset. If I got a good grade on something, I was like, yay, I got a good grade in the world. Or, I don't know, what's another example? Like, If I went to a movie and I liked the plot, then I had a good time. If I met someone and they were interesting and we had stuff in common, then we became friends. Like, it was all very externally driven. I was reacting to a world. That was completely my understanding of reality. And then I came across these principles. I can tell you about that later if you want, but it's not really an important part of the story, how I came across it. But what I learned, and it actually took me a little while, and someone who was, any of you who come to the Tuesday evening talk I do at Rise, there was a client of mine who was in the audience, and he said, for any of you who are new, I just want you to know, I just worked with Mara in January, and for the first 2 days, I just thought, bullshit. Bullshit, this is totally bullshit. You were there, right? And he's like, but if you hang in there with this and you experiment with it, you'll discover it's actually true. To my shock, it's actually true. And I felt the same way. I chuckled when he said that because I was like, Jan, I was right there with you. When I first learned this, it was so contrary to how I'd seen life that I didn't really believe it could be true. But essentially, my understanding of reality and what the world was really made of got completely flipped on its head. So what I learned is that actually the world doesn't exist for me, Mara, until something happens inside of me, which is that I have thinking. And I have thinking happening all day long automatically. It's built into the system. It's part of the intelligence of life, is that I'm thinking from the moment I'm born till the moment I die. And my thinking fluctuates. So sometimes it's lovely, sometimes it's not. And the interesting thing is, because I feel my thinking in my body as a reality, I have a whole sensory perception as if whatever I'm thinking was already happening in the world and just happened to happen to me. When in truth, I see the world according to my thinking in the moment. So I'm so bored of this example, but I keep giving it because it's the best one I know, and it happens to me 17 times a day. But New York City. New York City is a place. It's a world unto itself, right? We're all sitting in it, so you've all clearly experienced it. You were in it. You're in it now. You got here in it. Now, I know for me that there are so many times when the world of New York City is just delightful. It's full of energy. It's intriguing. I can't think of a more exciting place that I'd want to be. And I notice all of the wonderful things about it. All of the brilliant aspects of New York just stick out to me. Look at all these amazing restaurant options we have. Look at all these cool people for so many diverse backgrounds. And look how we all get to ride the subway together and hang out and people watch each other. And oh my gosh, any concert and any show and anything you'd ever want is here at your doorstep. So when I'm in that kind of thinking, the world of New York looks like a delightful place. It looks like it was delightful before I got here, and it's going to keep being delightful after I leave because it had nothing to do with me. New York is just great. Okay? Now, another day, in a different thought, I absolutely freaking hate this city. It is so annoying. It is so loud. It's so full of people. Crazy people, by the way. I don't know if you've noticed the density of crazies we have in this town, but they're everywhere, and it's like you're in a video game and you have to dodge them because they just come at you and do crazy to you. And then you have to hang out on a tiny subway car with them and navigate getting to your job with all the crazies around, and they're all up in your face and they smell weird and I mean, it's just shocking to me how difficult a world New York is. And it was always difficult. It's always going to be difficult. Now, when someone pointed out to me that, hey, guess what? New York doesn't change that much. You change a lot. And you're experiencing a reflection of your own thinking in the moment. You're not seeing New York. You're seeing your mind. When someone pointed out, I was like, oh yeah, duh. Like, of course. And people say this about their children. You're obsessed with them one second, the next you want to give them away on the sidewalk. There, go, run free, live with another family, just anyone but mine, you know? So it's like, once it's pointed out, you really do see, oh yeah, the people in my life, the places in my life, the things in my world change a lot, but they're changing more because of me, because my thinking projects them in a different way. Once someone pointed that out, that was kind of almost a little bit obvious. I was like, oh yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense. But there are also many ways in which it still wasn't obvious. Like, I thought that other people, particular people, not cities. Cities I could kind of get. Yeah, New York doesn't have a personality that's changing that much, but people do make you feel different day to day. But as I've begun to experiment with this, what I really see is, no, I'm experiencing my thinking about people. So the fact that we all live in different thinking and we all live in different versions of reality looks a lot simpler and clearer to me now than it used to. I used to think if somebody didn't have the same thinking as me, it could be a problem. Oh, we don't agree. Yikes, I better get away, or I better go pick a different friend. But what if that's your family? You know? Did anyone see the amazing Adele Thanksgiving dinner skit on SNL, Saturday Night Live? Raise your hand if you saw that. It's such a brilliant example of the fact that people live in different worlds because they have different thinking. So they're all sitting around the Thanksgiving table, and the little girl doesn't like that her family keeps fighting because one will say one statement, you know, like, well, we have to get rid of all the immigrants. And the other one's like, but my boyfriend's an immigrant. And then they just start, and the little girl just keeps turning on the Adele song, Hello from the US. Every time she turns the song on, they all stop and they just like take each other in. It's really funny. But it totally reminds me of my holiday dinners, right? Like, so there was this really lovely moment where I felt like this big shift in my reality where I realized, oh yeah, I'm thinking about the world. The world isn't happening to me. I'm happening. And then I see a world. And so that's the first part, kind of getting ahead of myself. So there's two parts. One is really beginning to see that we're experiencing our own thoughts. And that looks like a world. Okay? And that, I've been interested in this, learning about this for 11 years, and I haven't even felt like I've barely scratched the surface of what that really means. But I do know that I literally feel like I have different eyeballs and different kinds of thoughts. I will see different things in different kinds of thoughts. So I will miss things when I'm in a bad mood because all I'll see is what's bad. You know? All the bad things happen to me. And in different thinking, all I can see is possibilities in my life. Oh, this would be fun. This would be interesting. How come none of those possibilities were there yesterday? Oh, right, because yesterday only bad things happened to me. And it's so intriguing to get curious about that and kind of dig around in there and see what's possible for people when they realize the world isn't happening to them, it's coming from them. So that was kind of step one. Add to that, or should I keep going?
Keep going, because I'm going to do a different version of the same thing.
Okay, so. Cool. So, step two was realizing that, and I was talking about this with the group today, which some of you are here, is that I can change my thinking, or my thinking will change if I don't get stuck in it. And that, I know that doesn't sound that interesting, but essentially, if the world we're living in is a reflection of our thought, and we can change our thought, then we can change our world. So I didn't realize until I started learning that this is what I was dealing with, and that actually thought kind of comes from an infinite well. Which means, but for this thought, when that goes, I'll get another one. So the only thing that ever gets me stuck in my life is that I get dug into my own thinking. And I forget that there's an infinite well. And so I start to feel like this is the limits of my world, or this is the limits of what's possible for me. And I literally accidentally turn my back on the doorway to a new world. And I'll give you a really simple example of this that really opened my eyes, is I didn't realize that I could have another thought about people I didn't like. I know that sounds weird, but I just thought, oh, if I had a certain interaction with you and I didn't like you, well, that was kind of that, you know? So we were different. We were going to go our separate ways. And as I started learning about this, I realized, well, that'll make your world small. And actually, what I also noticed is it makes you have to work around people. Or in extreme cases, it makes you live in bad feelings because you feel like you hate people and you feel justified in hating them because you feel like they did it to you. Not knowing that you just dug into a thought about someone and kind of gave up on them when really you just shut down your own mind. So I was saying to the group today, it was really interesting when I realized that in principle, we're all just thinking creatures and we can all think again. So it reminds me of the Descartes phrase, I think, therefore I am. That's actually a really profoundly beautiful phrase because it just shows you that the fact that you think allows you to be. But you notice that Descartes didn't say, I think, therefore I'm right. He didn't say that. Because that would make us a very angry world. And it would make us not get along with each other very well. And actually what I realized is the areas of my life where I didn't get along with people very well was because I thought my thinking was right. And they were wrong. And I didn't like the feeling of that, and I blamed it on them. And when I learned these principles, I couldn't blame my bad feeling on anyone anymore. It's a little annoying at first, actually. You're kind of like, ooh, wait a second, don't take that away from me. Really, really annoying, actually. For like the first week, it really bothered me because all of the pain and suffering that I attributed to other people, I suddenly had to step back and go, well, if this is true, which I was very curious to consider because if it was true, there was so much power in it, but I really didn't want to give up at first. That the suffering I experienced had actually come from those other people in the world. But I couldn't deny it once I started looking at it. I couldn't unsee it once I started to see it. And I realized, oh my gosh, I have the infinite capacity to have another thought about someone. And if I'm not blaming the world out there, blaming other people for my bad feeling, then I'm setting myself up to look to have a new thought about them. The second I put it out there and I say, you're the problem with the world, or you're the reason I feel bad, I have shut down my own potential for a new thought because I didn't see it came from thought. I thought it came from you. Do you see how that piece really turns the tables on you in a really helpful way? There was a woman in a business training I did that she was French and I want to try to do a French. She's like, this, I said, do not like this. And I said, why? And she says, this is the ultimate accountability model. And I was like, interesting. And then she kind of paused and she said, but I do like it because the other side of accountability is freedom. And I was like, very nice. And it's true. The second you take accountability that your experience actually comes from you, and think about it. I was joking this morning, like, Michael can't make you feel good. I can't make you feel bad, just like I can't make you feel bad or good or anything. It's because we don't get inside the minds of other people. I can't actually go inside you and start making you feel something right now. You have to want to go there in your thinking. And you know that, like when your kid tells you, Mommy, I'm so scared because there's a monster in my room, you're not like, oh my God, really? I'm actually really scared now. You're like, no, that's okay. You don't understand. Monsters aren't real because you have your own thinking about it. Your kids have their own thinking about it. So realizing that my feeling wasn't being caused by the outside world was huge for me. And realizing that I could have another thought about people because just because I was thinking one thing and they were thinking another didn't mean anything about them or me. It just meant, I think, therefore I am. You think, therefore you are. We all think and we all think differently. That doesn't have to be a problem if I'm fluid about this. I don't take it personally. It becomes a massive problem if I dig into it and I do take it personally. So those two pieces just translated to an enormous amount of freedom and my own feeling about life and how I could navigate the world out there.
I'm so debating whether or not to tell this story, but I'm going to tell it. So I was giving a talk about this in a maximum security prison to a gang unit. And there was a guy standing at the back, very big guy, lots of tats. And I shared a version of what Mara was just sharing. And in my version, I spent a lot of time talking about the infinite well, part of it. I didn't use that word, but about the capacity to think again. Like, that is the greatest gift of having a mind, is that we can think again. We can turn the page. Like, no matter how absolutely I've created the world. Oh, I don't like that. Okay, I'm going to fix the world. No, don't like that. I'm going to fix the world. Oh, this isn't working. I need help. I'm going to bring in other things to help fix the world. No, that's still horrible. Okay, now I'm going to we got to fix the world. Oh God, no, I've made a mess of that. So let me see if I can fix the mess that I made of the world. And it gets worse and worse and worse because I forget that at any moment I can just turn the page. I can think again. I can create anew. I get a second chance. I get a fresh start. And I don't just get one. Right? The flip chart goes on forever. As long as I've got a mind, there's space in it for a fresh thought. And this guy at the back of the room said, well, it sounds to me like you're dissing Jesus. And I didn't think I was dissing Jesus, but I thought I'd best find out what he meant.
Which part of this upset him?
Well, so this is what he said. I said to him, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you're making it sound like the chance to see anew, the chance to step into a new world, the chance to be born again with fresh eyes, to see the world without any of the residue of how you've seen it in the past is like science or something. Like it's just how things work. And I know that it is only possible through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, because I'm living in the feeling of my thinking, same as him, I'm creating the world in my thoughts, same as him, I didn't react the way I would have thought I would have reacted to that, right? A new thought came to me in that moment. And the thought that came to me was, how freaking cool is this? Like, here's a guy whose life, I don't know his backstory, but it's probably not a lot like mine. Whose background completely different to mine, whose upbringing completely different to mine, whose life experience completely different to mine, and yet he saw the same potential for fresh, new thought, for a fresh start, to be able to turn the page and create the world anew that I saw. Now, he attributed it to one thing, I attributed it to another, but I said to him, isn't it cool? Don't you feel hopeful that maybe if we both see this, even though we explain it differently, maybe we're right? And he was like, yeah. And the conversation got really good from there because we stopped worrying about why it works that way. We just got kind of into the possibilities that open up because it works that way. Now, sometimes when I talk about it, one of the ways I like to talk about it, and it's something like this, but not this. But, you all know the famous formula, right? The E equals mc squared, right? Energy is matter times the mass times the speed of light, blah, blah, blah. We've exhausted my knowledge of physics, so don't worry, we're not going any deeper into that. But, metaphorically, there is an energy of life. There is a oneness. There is an infinite well. There is an infinite capacity. There is something, and we can call it what we will. We can call it energy. We can call it life force. We can call it spirit. We can call it what we call it. We can call it God and Jesus. We can call it science. There is an energy of life that everything is made up of, right? The form and the formless are the same thing in different forms, right? It's fluid, it's solid. And the difference is the speed of vibration. That's the implication of this. Well, there was a story, I don't think you told me the story, but it's one of my favorite Syd Banks stories, that he went into the work with the Navy, and he was talking to some physicists in the Navy, and this was on the board for some reason, and he said, I've always thought that's wrong. And, the bemused physicist, as we can imagine, was like, okay, why is that wrong, Syd? And he said, well, shouldn't it be this? E equals mc to the infinite? Because if energy is infinite, well, then shouldn't the possibility for what can get created be infinite as well? And, as the story goes, I wasn't there, the physicist kind of went, shit. But that's kind of what we are talking about as the real world. The real world isn't what has been created so far, and it isn't just this invisible potential. It's the whole ball of wax. And the whole ability in any moment for new thought to come out of the infinite well, So the equal sign is kind of like, this is the new thought, right? This is what transforms the formless into form. Everything comes from nothing. And the way that it does that is via thought. It's created in the mind and then projected out into the world and then experienced as if it's really happening out there, right? The mind works like a projector, not a camera. We're not photographing real things with our mind. We're projecting thought out onto the world and then experiencing it back in consciousness. So one of the things that I always find kind of interesting, we were talking about this in the conversation, is that a lot of people think to even have a conversation about changing the world is a terribly naive thing. But what's naive in my mind is to think that because the world looks a certain way to us, it is that way. Because that just doesn't take into account the invisible force at play. It doesn't take into account the infinite well. It doesn't take into account the capacity for fresh thought in any moment. And the reality that whatever thought comes in, comes with feeling, comes with experience, brings new possibility to the world. Is that making sense? This means yes.
I read it. Every year, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation puts out their annual letter. I don't know if anyone has ever seen this but this year, their annual, state of the world address from Bill and Melinda in 2016 was, they said they had recently been giving a talk to a second grade class in a school. And the students had asked them, if you could have one superpower, what would it be? So that was what they based their letter on. It was, what would Bill's superpower be and what would Melinda's? And Bill said his would be energy. And Melinda said hers would be time. That was really interesting. And it was really fascinating because basically what Bill Gates said is, the number of people still living in, third world developing nations where they do not have access to electricity, basic energy, and how much that slows down the progress for them is way higher than we realize. And also that getting energy to them isn't going to be done by the way we've been doing energy so far. It's just not possible, and it's actually not sustainable for the earth. So fossil fuels and things like that. So he said, he breaks down the whole current state of things. And then at the end, he says, so basically we need an energy miracle. And he says, I know people think that's a naive word, miracle. He said, but actually you see it happen all the time. Because a miracle is just a new idea that no one's thought of yet. And he says, and I'm in the business of those, and I'm interested in those. And I love how he said that. He said, the internet was a miracle. And it really is. What looks miraculous to us is just something we've never seen before. But if you think about human progress, what's happened is somebody has had a eureka moment, a new idea, a thought from that infinite well out of the blue that said, hey, here's something we've never tried before. And then, oh my gosh, look, we've got a light bulb. Or, oh my gosh, look, we have solar technology. Or, oh my gosh, look, we've got whatever we've got. And I really love the way he said that is, we need a miracle, but don't worry, miracles happen every day. They're just new thoughts. Really beautifully put. And what he didn't say in there, but what I'm interested in is when we talk to people about this understanding of the mind, they start experiencing what feel to them like miracles. They see things in their life that are brand new. And the reason people get, after learning these principles of the mind, they have that sensation of like, oh my God this, oh my God that, this is amazing. Like, that client said, since we worked with One Thought, we feel like we see a different world. And that is way more, like I liked how ordinary Bill, my friend Bill, I liked how ordinary Bill made it.
Billy Boy.
Yeah.
Nice.
And because it is. When you understand the mind, the innovation and a new world is just seeing new thought. All of a sudden what happens is the only thing that's standing in the way of that becomes way flimsier, way lighter, which is just you believed so much in your other thinking. That's a big part of what happens to people when these principles get illuminated to them, that kind of the setup for the magic trick, is all of a sudden you see, oh, the only thing standing in my way of seeing a different world is that I believe so much in my current thinking. So if you think someone else causes your bad feeling, then you're stuck with that. But if you're willing to go back to the well and look again, it's kind of a miracle when you realize other people can't cause your bad feeling. And it's also amazing to just have, I mean, you're a writer, you've written books, but you know that experience of thinking too much on something, getting all in a snarl, and then finally going, oh, to hell with it, and walking away. And as you're running or walking through the aisle in the supermarket, all of a sudden, ding, a brand new idea comes to you, and it's like, oh my God, there's a book. There's an idea from a book for a book. Out of nothing came something. And in terms of our evolution and our advancement, getting people's old thinking out of the way to free up the potential for new thought to happen more readily is what's going to bring us more miracles. I kind of wanted to write Bill and be like, hey.
I have an idea.
Yeah, come to this conference, you know. But it's amazing. Again, like I love when you brought up it sounds naive, and Bill Gates was saying the same thing. I know that people think miracles sounds crazy, but it's actually not. It's not naive and it's not crazy, and it's not even miraculous. It's the most ordinary birthright we're all walking around with. We just don't see it in moments because we're so tricked by and compelled by thinking our thinking is right or real or somehow more fixed or concrete than it actually is.
There's another piece to this, which is kind of just picking up on that. Is part of why it seems naive is, well, because people have been trying to solve these problems for thousands of years or hundreds of years or however many years, depending on the nature of the problem. But here's the thing: is if we kind of us, and out here is that's the world. I don't know how to draw it, but
I was just thinking you did a really nice profile. I wish I could do that as well.
Well, I'm making up for it with my drawing of the world. So that's Earth, like the world. That's a representation of the world.
I think that the tectonic plates are coming back together.
It's kind of Pangea.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so we've spent thousands of years looking at this problem from every angle, right? The greatest minds in the world have looked at these problems from every angle. But remarkably little time has been spent looking at that which creates the world. Looking into the fertile void, looking into the infinite well. So we look at what's come out of the well and we go, what are we going to do about this? We look at the cookies that have come out of the oven that are burnt and go, what are we going to do about these burnt cookies? Oh, I know, we'll put frosting on them. Well, now you have burnt cookies with frosting on them. Well, what about chocolate sprinkles? It'll help. But they'll still be burnt cookies with frosting and chocolate sprinkles on them. Well, let's break them into smaller pieces to make them easier to eat. Yes, they are easier to eat burnt cookie pieces with chocolate sprinkles and frosting on them. Right? You can play that game forever, or you can go back to the oven and see what's coming out of the oven next. And if you don't like that batch, if that batch doesn't work, if that batch is off, if the recipe is off, if that batch is still a little sour or a little too sweet or a little burnt, well, you can go back to the oven again. Go back to the oven as many times as you need to. You can go back to the well as many times as you need to. But if you're looking to the oven, there's a much better chance you're going to get fresh cookies. If you're looking to the source of the world, there's a much better chance you're going to find yourself in a better world. And just in a really practical way, the difficulty is that we think we can predict the future based on the past. Which, if it wasn't a thought-created world, might make some sense, right? But if it's a thought-created world and the nature of thought is transient, it changes whenever we let it, whenever we let kind of go, I don't know, boom, new thought, every time. Well, we don't know what new thought is going to come to us in a future now. So we can't predict the future based on the past, because that doesn't take into account thought in the moment. New thought in the moment. New thought in the moment. So whatever models we have for predicting the future are only accurate to the extent that thinking doesn't change. But fortunately, thinking is a lot more likely to change than the world, because the nature of thought has changed. Right? You can't hold a thought in your head for any length of time. You don't know what you're going to be thinking in 5 minutes. And yet we're pretty convinced that the world's still going to look like this in 5 years, 50 years, 500 years. And that's scary. Right? That's a scary thought for most of us. And it's a scary enough thought, because we don't see that it's thought, that we don't want to think about it. So we ignore it. And we go back to making the best of the burnt cookie. Well, there is another possibility. It's such a simple possibility. It's such a friendly possibility. I hate to say it, but look within. Look to the unknown. Look to the not yet created. Look to the place where the world comes from. See what new can come. And it's weird because, like, I don't know about if this happens to you on your, because we both work with private clients, we work with groups over time. And one of the things that often happens, actually I do know, because you talked about this, one of the things that often happens is people will have a shift in consciousness. They'll see things differently, and they'll talk about, ooh, can we talk about how I'm going to bring this back into my life? Mm-hmm. How I'm going to bring this back into that real world that I left, and how I'll handle that world better? And you can't. Because with new thinking, you can't go back to that world. Right? Heraclitus said you can't step in the same river twice. Well, it's the same thing. You can't live in a world that your old thought created when you have new thought. It's not there anymore. And that's really good news. So I was working with this one guy who was he came because he was having so much trouble with the people at work. They were abusive to him. They were mean to him. It was like a 5-year-old, but it was really like, he wanted resources, confidence and all that stuff. And he found it. Because the truth is, when we're not all caught up in this, there's a natural confidence. There's a natural well-being. There's a natural presence. There's a natural receptiveness, connectivity that comes with us. There's a kind of a natural genius that comes out of us. We're pretty bright when we're not overthinking it, right? We do pretty well. And so he was really keen to know, well, I wonder what it's going to be like when I bring the new me back to those horrible people. And I kind of forgot about it because I had a back-to-back client thing, and a couple weeks later I had a follow-up call. And I said, how's it going? And he goes, good. And I said, well, how are you getting on with the people? And he said, I haven't had a chance to put that to the test. I said, have you been off work? He said, no, I've been at work. What do you mean you haven't put it to the test? He said, well, I don't know why, but for some reason they're just being really nice to me. Right? If we don't know it's a magic trick, we think it's magic. It's magical. It's really cool, but it's not magic. It's how it works.
There's one story of that came to mind that was the most extreme to me, because when I was first doing this work, there were ways in which I could see it, but I had these like lingering exceptions in the beginning where I thought, all this is fine and good, but there's got to be times where it's just too hard, or there's too much bad that's happened to someone, and I don't know if it was the same maximum security prison you went to, but was yours with Kathy? Or? Yeah. So a colleague of ours, Kathy, teaches these principles to prison inmates, and she works in maximum security prisons where people have done some really crazy things. And when I was in there listening to these guys tell me what they'd learned since Kathy had been teaching them these principles, there was one guy that really stood out, and he was sitting on the front row. And he was just had like the nicest kind of vibe, and he was just sort of hanging out, and he sort of let everybody else talk first. He was very kind of let the whole group, and they were so excited to tell me what they'd learned. And the biggest thing they learned, and sounds so silly, but the biggest thing they learned is, I didn't know I didn't have to act on my thinking. It sounds so basic, but it was like if I had known it was just thought and it was going to go away if I didn't do anything to it, I wouldn't be in here. That was what most of them said. And a lot of them were talking about, it was tough growing up. And at one point I asked them, because a lot of them talked about foster care, and I was like, how many of you were in foster care? And I'm not exaggerating, like 70% of their hands went up. This was a room of 60 men. So I'm thinking, God, that's got to be so tough. And this one guy, he waits for everyone to finish, and then he says, I was raised in foster care too, and I didn't ever feel like anyone loved me or like I was good enough. And I didn't really go to school because I just thought, why? Who cares? No one cares if I succeed or not. I'm just stupid. I'd been told I was stupid, and I believed it. So I just quit going to school. And, if you don't go to school, then you get into trouble, and then you're all caught up in gangs. And if you believe you're thinking, you think you need that. And you think you have to do certain things to keep those people's approval. And then, you end up in my situation. He said, but I'm so grateful that I learned this, because I feel like I've started life over. And he says, so I've gotten interested in learning just because I can. Just for me. He says, so we have a library here in the prison. And he says, so I've just been going on my own, and I've been learning about science and math and really into literature. And I'm actually pretty good at science, which who knew? He goes, actually in general, I'm pretty smart. I'm really smart, actually. And I wouldn't have known that about myself. I was like, he's so matter of fact about it. He says, so I'm having a really good time kind of teaching myself all of these subjects and discovering how smart I am. And he says, and I wrote a book, and I'm actually talking with someone about getting it published. And I was like, really? What did you write a book about? And of course, in my thinking, I imagine that he's going to tell me, I talked about my life growing up in foster care and ending up in a gang and whatever the hell he did to get in prison. I don't know. And I'm assuming that's what he's going to say. And he says, well, I know that the title is You Have Very Lovely Feet. And I was like, okay, interesting title. What is that about? He says, well, it's a book about acceptance. He said, if I've learned anything while I've been in prison, it's just accepting that I did the best I could with the thoughts I had, but now I have new ones. And he says, and I had a girlfriend way back when I was still on the outside, and she had this thing about, she was really insecure about her feet. I thought she had fine feet, but she really believed that she had bad feet. So she lived in this world where she had ugly feet. Isn't that weird? It's like, I love that that's the slant of your whole book. You have very lovely feet. It's a book about acceptance. It's learning that it's just your thinking. I was like, that is so freaking profound and cool. And I was so touched by him. I mean, he was just so delightful. And when we left the prison that day, Kathy and I were walking in the parking lot. And I said to Kathy, when that guy gets out, call me. I want to hire him. I'm serious. I want him to work for me. I'm giving him a job. And she said, which guy? And I said, the guy in the front row, writing a book, you have very lovely feet. And she says, oh, you didn't know. Didn't you see they have different colored suits on? So he's wearing brown, which means he's on death row. And that was when I realized that there's no limit to people's freedom of thought. That guy could say all of that and have all of that feeling about life and all of that clarity. He's not angry and he's not getting out. He's dying in there. And that just showed me, like, there is no limit to this. And I learned in that moment that I had made exceptions in my head. Well, this is fine for someone like in my situation to play with because I have the luxury of playing with my mind because my life isn't super hard. But when I met him, I changed my mind about that. And I've since, that was like 1 year into my career doing this, but I've since met people who have had all kinds of stories that have blown me away and shown me that it doesn't matter where you're born, what you grew up in, or what kind of thinking you grew up around. Freedom of mind is on offer for anybody, and when they see it, they can change their world.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so let's check in and see what you're curious about so far.
And we'll ask just if you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you, and if we ask you to stand so the people watching on the live stream can hear and see you.
There's 50 more of you on the internet. Not the whole internet, just the ones that happen to be watching this right now.
It's a miracle.
You know what I mean? Yeah. You hear the internet is huge. So I'm curious, one of two things. Either what's resonating with people that they'd be willing to share, this makes sense to me, or this is intriguing to me, or what questions do people have?
And in particular, actually, I'll take the exceptions one a little further, which is where does it look like, yeah, but not here? Because we're not attempting to present a hopeful model in the abstract. We're actually asserting this is true. This is the truth of how the world is created, moment by moment, 7 billion times a moment. Right? And so chances are whatever looks like, yeah, but not here, is where the world isn't changing and where the world can't change. So that's an interesting place to look. Yeah.
Hi, I'm David. I guess the question is, as you're thinking about this and changing the world and introducing these ideas to people who are in positions to make changes on a bigger scale, let's say, so like heads of state, how do you imagine bringing this kind of thinking or this of sharing the principles with those people? How do you get them to listen?
I've been reflecting a lot on that lately. And I don't know the answer to it, but I have things I'm interested in experimenting with. And one is just, if you know any of them, have them call me. Okay, so that's one. Just get that out of the way.
Okay, should I make a list? Is this going to go on for a while?
So step one, call Mara or Michael or anyone else in our field. No, because I've always thought, like, God, just give me 20 minutes with Obama or just give me 15 minutes with so-and-so. You know, it's like, and so I joke about that, but I'm also totally serious because I feel like anytime, like, I have to go out and talk to business leaders about this as part of my job is sharing this with business. And part of the reason I got interested in working with businesses is because I felt like, in a weird way, they kind of run the world right now. Like, we used to look to religion a lot. We don't so much anymore, at least on a mass level. politics people kind of don't even take seriously anymore. Oh my God, particularly this year, like why bother? So there's this interesting sense to me that it seems like in a way, businesses drive a lot of the decisions being made at a large scale level. So that was one of the reasons why Aaron and I founded One Thought, to focus on business, because what we noticed is if you bring this understanding into businesses, it ripples out very quickly and it affects a lot of people. And then those are people that are having an influence on the economy and the world and decisions being made. So there's different ways in which you can go about it. But one of the things I've been thinking, particularly around this kind of global change, is we're talking about how do you bring people together in certain pockets such that you can make enough noise that people of influence can't ignore it anymore. And so we've been talking with people in education a lot recently, and they're noticing one of the greatest quotes I heard, I was just in London for the last 3 days, and two of the people on our institute this year are head teachers, which in London means you're kind of overseeing multiple schools. And so the one guy sitting in our training said, "Oh my God, I realize that education isn't broken, because education isn't a thing. Like Michael said, you can't put education in a wheelbarrow." And he's like, we all have these discussions about education as if it's coming from something outside of us. And he said, it's not coming from something outside of us. He goes, it's the fact that I am a teacher in a school teaching kids the exact opposite of what's going to be helpful to them. So the lead up time before exams, all we do is tell them how important exams are and how stressed out they should be about that. And he's like, that doesn't make sense to me anymore, given what I'm learning. I want my kids to have, the kids in my schools, to have freedom of thought, not to feel oppressed and burdened by this thing called the school system and by the way we're teaching them. So it was really interesting to see him having insights. And more than anything, it was like how they work together as a team. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I think that there's something about changing certain fundamental systems from the inside out that's going to make certain people go, oh, that's interesting. What's happening there? Or what's happening there? Like, how come all the inmates that get out of that prison don't reoffend? That's interesting.
And I kind of am going to answer it differently, because it looks a little different to me. First off, I've been in this conversation with several royal families of several countries. I know other people who are in conversation with very high-level politicians in various countries. So the conversation is already unfolding at very high levels around the world. Having said that, I don't think change really happens top-down.
Yeah.
I think change happens bottom-up. If you look at the evolution of the world, it's pretty much always bottom-up. It's an emergent phenomenon, not an imposed phenomenon. And so that's why, for me, I've gotten to have this conversation on 6 continents, right? I've had the conversation in townships. I've had it in townhouses, right? I mean, I'm not trying to be cute, but it's like, I don't know where the next new thought is going to come, or in whose head it's going to come, or which world that somebody creates in their mind is so compelling that everybody goes, let's join that world, right? Let's create that one. But I'm not convinced in any way, shape, or form that it's going to come top down. Doesn't mean I'm not as happy to talk top down as bottom up, but I just don't think that necessarily is where we need to look.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah? Over there, Martin?
This is probably going to be a bit controversial, but I think that everybody gets freaked out by the scale of this thing. Actually, when you talk about terrorism, it's minute in comparison with the population, and yet people get so fearful. I mean, I was talking to somebody today about not thinking about going to Paris because 6 weeks ago, I'm sorry if anybody knows anybody, but it's really tiny. Why is everybody getting so freaked out? I mean, it's just, that thinking does not help anything in terms of fear about what's going on. It's really not helping anybody to hold on to that fear, because it's just like a bad thought. It's just not worthy of paying attention to. I'm not saying the problem is going to go away, but it's just the frenzy of focus on these things is ridiculous.
So fear's a funny thing, right? If you think about the word terrorism, right? Well, terror is kind of the key word here.
Oh, the ism wasn't the
The
big
ism's
part?
not
Okay,
really the
just
important
checking.
part, right? And we don't do really well in terror, right? Human beings are not designed to function optimally when terrified. In fact, we're designed to function minimally when terrified, literally fight or flight, right? That's what we got. Well, as long as it looks to me like the cause of my terror is outside me and I cannot do anything about it, actually, I think if I lived in a world where I thought the source of the fear and terror I was experiencing was in Paris, I would stay the hell away from Paris. But the moment I see, insightfully, not logically, but I see, holy crap, that can't exist, that feeling of terror, without my thought. That's actually being created in here, and then I'm projecting it onto Paris, or the Middle East, or wherever I'm projecting it onto. That opens something new up, which is the possibility of a new thought. But even before the new thought, I don't have to be quite so scared of the movie. Right? If I start to kind of suspect that it might be a projection of the mind, well, then I can kind of go and poke at the screen a little bit. And I can see for myself, oh, okay. Now, there's still probably parts of Paris I won't go to, but it'll be because I know a little bit about Paris, not because I'm so freaking scared that I don't want to get out of my house. So again, it's back to insight. It's back to seeing, how does this really work? It's not feel the fear and do it anyway. It's simply see the moment you see where the fear is coming from, it's not as scary. And it opens up the possibility of movement that literally wasn't possible when I thought that fear was coming at me, not from me.
Well, and I do feel like one of the things that why we want to start having this conversation more explicitly at this level is because of there's kind of a group think, for lack of a better term, that says, oh yeah, the outside world is scary, you should be afraid. Really? I mean, that's kind of the chatter du jour. And if we all agree that, oh yeah, that can exist that way, that yes, things out there can scare me, I should be scared of them, then we're that much more likely to get sucked into that. So the fact that, I mean, most slightly intelligent adults know that the media just focuses on everything that's wrong. And that's why people love comedy or, you know, Brandon, whatever his name's Humans of New York, because it's like, finally, somebody's talking about something funny or something lighthearted or something really great that's going on in the world, because we all know it exists. But the media loves to feed on this idea that the outside world is very scary, and so we're just going to focus on that, which if you don't buy into that as an assumption about the way that the world works, you're way better equipped to deal with it. So I can kind of watch the news and take it for what it is, or I can just not watch it or whatever. But if I don't know that, I'm going to watch that and get terrified and keep watching. You'll be glued to it. And everyone knows these people that are like, well, I don't know. Did you see yesterday? It says the numbers are up percent. And I'm that much more likely I'm more likely to get killed by a homegrown terrorist now than one of the other ones. Like, it's like, oh my God. So it breeds a certain insanity for sure. But that's why I feel like it's really important that people are having a conversation that says the opposite. Because that's the popular conversation right now. And I'm not only bored of it, but I want to be a part of changing it. And it was so interesting to me because one of the first times I ever really saw, like in an instant, you're looking at the wrong part of the problem was when I was in Santa Barbara a couple of years ago when there was a shooting in Santa Barbara. Do you remember the college kid went on a rampage, shot a bunch of people? And I happened to be in Santa Barbara, so I got these texts. I didn't even know what was happening because I was just hanging out with my family. I wasn't watching the news, and I got these text messages, everyone okay? Are you guys okay over there? And I'm like, oh God, what now? You know?
Yeah.
And I saw, and then the massive response to that, you know, anytime there's a shooting, there's just days of news coverage about guns. And I personally would be fine if we got rid of all the guns. Me, Mara, I would be fine with that. But you could see that the debate about the guns was just never ending. Snarl. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. And this is back and forth, back and forth. And I was just like, this is not the issue. You could take all of the money that people are spending on the gun conversation and all the lobbying back and forth and all the different debates that have been had and put that in teaching students, kids in school that their experience does not come from the outside and there will be no more shootings. That guy's crazy little note that he wrote was all about how he didn't have the girls, he didn't have the cars, he didn't have the money. I mean, it was such a sad demonstration of a misunderstanding of the mind. The reason he did that was because he felt really unhappy and really angry because of these things outside of him that he didn't have. And if we were learning that as basic as learning, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, you kind of get the numbers down within the first few years of being in school. If the most basic thing we were teaching was your experience of how you're feeling is not coming from the world out there, it'd be very hard to go shoot a bunch of people. Very hard.
It really is literally looking at the wrong side of the equation. And I kind of want to reiterate the point that we're not suggesting this is a better way of looking at it. We're saying this is true. This is how it works. Okay, so I want to literally the equation. So, okay, everyone knows 48 is the scariest number in the world, right? Oh, not 48. We're not going to talk about 48. I don't think 48 should be allowed. No. It needs to be a number in the 50s. No, the numbers were much better when they were still in the 30s. Not 48. You heard 48 is coming back. 48. Well, right. 48 doesn't exist in a vacuum. 48 is the wrong part of the equation for us to be looking at. It is the result of something. We can argue about the result all we want, but if we don't understand what's on this side of the equation, 48 will never change. But over here, we have this, and we think that these question marks are solid. Well, it's got to be 25 and 13. Is that 48? No, it's not. It's got to be 25 and 23. Am I wowing you? I've done physics. I can do math. And you have beautiful feet. Sorry. But we don't realize that actually the critical variable here, the X factor, if you want to look at it that way, is thought in the moment. When this changes, this has to change. Now, it might only change to 49 at first. It might change to 46. It might change to 52. But this cannot not change when this changes. That's just how math works. We're suggesting thought creates feeling is the math of the universe. It's the math of the human universe. It's the math of how human experience works. And it's really useful to know that math if you want to change what's on this side of the equation.
And the only other piece I would add to that is that it's funny because it's like, well, yeah, if you want to change the world, you have to change people's thinking. And then people go, well, that's really hard. Hard to change people's thinking. And I thought that too until I started doing this for a living. And I was like, actually, given the opportunity, people love changing their thinking. It's massively freeing, and it's fun, and it's intriguing. And I'll give you a great example of someone I know that I think is such a simple proof that one person changing their thinking can change the world. Is that a friend of mine, she's kind of a friend of a friend, but a girl I know named Lauren Nicole Singer, she started a blog a few years ago called Trash is for Tossers. Because she was an environmental studies major at NYU. And she realized that the amount of trash people were producing was absolutely astronomical and ridiculous and unnecessary. And so she started this blog when she made up her mind in a moment to see if she could stop producing trash. And the moment that happened to her, and this is what I love about it because it's so simple, is she was sitting in her environmental science class, judging the girl next to her who brought her lunch every day in disposable containers, so like plastic, styrofoam, that not reusable. She'd just throw them away. So she'd have bags and containers, whatever, eat her lunch and then throw it away. And she thought, here we are, it's 2013 or whatever it was, and we're sitting in an environmental science class, and you're bringing your lunch and stuff that's just going to go into a landfill every day. What's wrong with this picture? And then she went home to her apartment and she opened her fridge and she realized everything in her fridge was packaging that was just going to end up in the trash. And she thought, I'm no better than that girl sitting next to me. I'm just not bringing it to class every day, but here it is sitting in my apartment. And so in a moment, she thought, I wonder if I could produce no trash. And for the last 2 odd years, she's been doing it for over 2 years, the trash she has produced that she either can't recycle or reuse or compost is sitting in one mason jar, a little cap on top. And she's fascinating. She's discovered, and what's so interesting about it is like, once you turn your mind away from a way of thinking, all of a sudden you get all sorts of new thoughts become available. So when she said, I don't want to do it this way anymore, I want to see what happens if I try to do it this way, she's basically become super innovative. She's ended up with her own product line because she's creating all of these waste-free products. So everyone's like, but you look great and you're dressed normal and your hair's clearly clean. Yeah, like
this is weird.
People can't wrap their mind around it. So she has this massive following now and she's getting asked to speak everywhere. She's done TED Talks. She was on the Summit at Sea cruise with like all of the smartest people in the world and all that stuff. And she's, in her early 20s, mid 20s now. And it was such a perfect example, I did an interview with her and talking to her, I just loved hearing how simple it was. It was in a moment in time where she realized, oh, I'm doing the same thing I was judging a second ago. Well, what if I tried not to? What would that look like? And everything that's led from there has just been this amazing journey. And she's showing that it's easy, it's fun, you still look cute. Like, it's amazing the amount of people I follow her on Instagram and they're like, how does your hair look so good? You don't use shampoo, do you? And she's like, and she just explains how she's made her own products and actually how much healthier she feels and all these things. And she makes it look so easy. And it shows you that if we weren't stuck in our ways of thinking about the convenience of things, that it would be easy for us too. And some people are heading in that direction. But what I loved about her is it was a moment in time and everything changed.
No, there's a critical piece in this. Right, I didn't know that. I've heard you tell that. I mean, Clara and I, we look at her blog and some of the stuff that she does, and it's incredibly cool. She wondered, right? That's how you go to the well, right? What makes us think that it's hard to change our thinking is we think that means put this thought that we've already decided is the right thought in here. How do I get people to think the way I think they need to think to create the result I think we need to create? That is hard, but that's not changing your thinking. That is imposing your thinking as an act of will onto another. We are not designed to impose or receive thoughts as acts of will. It can sort of be done temporarily if you use enough fear. Sort of, for a while. We're actually talking about allowing fresh thought to come in. changing your thinking not as an act of will, but as an act of invitation, as an act of possibility, as an act of receptivity. That's a whole different thing. The willingness is all. The openness to see something different, to be wrong. Right? That's not so hard. I mean, a little embarrassing sometimes, but not so hard. Your thinking changes all the time already. It's just opening it up, even in those areas that seem important and fixed and scary. You take advantage of this natural capacity of the mind for fresh thought to come in. It's exactly the writing process, right? That is writer's block, right? I've done in various guises. I've done 12 books, 12 published books, right? Writer's block is when I'm trying to make this thought come out of these fingers onto that screen. And this thought doesn't want to come out. It's like a kidney stone. It hurts, right? And I can push and push and push, and I can make my fingers move, but boy, what comes out is ugly. But if I give up, if I go for a walk, if I go for a coffee, if I sing karaoke with my daughter, if I go do something else, if I let it go away, fresh thought comes in, and then I'm back at the keyboard an hour later, and a whole new thing is there, a whole new idea, a whole new flow. That's just how it works. That's how songs get created. That's how art gets created. That's how the world gets created. And that's how the world can get recreated. That's how the world can change. Really, I can't talk sitting down. I'm just noticing I get up every time. I get excited.
I'm just tired, so I'm sitting permanently. Yeah, and I wanted to just say one more thing, and then I'd really love to take more questions. But they say every great journey starts with the first step. It's like there's been something about when I look at, like some of the greatest things that happened, like the U.S. Constitution was written or the internet happened. It's like at some point somebody just looked at somebody else and said, I've been thinking, or what if?
Yeah.
Or like Lauren, I wonder if I could live without waste. Like to question something and go in a direction. And like one of the reasons that I kind of have decided I really want to, I'm interested in continuing to work with individuals and continuing to work with businesses because I see the ripple effect that has, but I've never tried to just talk to people about the fact that the state of the world we're living in is just our thinking so far, and we can change that, like at a global level. And I'm very intrigued and curious what anyone sitting here thinks about that and where that might go. It just occurred to me, you just have to start a conversation. If you want to see if that's possible or where that goes, just start that conversation. So that's, like Michael and I were joking, like we sort of obnoxiously titled the talk, "Can You Change the World in 2 Hours?" Because we're like, we have no idea, but let's try, like let's at least.
What the hell, right?
Yeah.
It's Friday night,
And we're doing, it was perfect timing because we're doing this conference in Oslo in the end of May called One Solution, the key to unlocking global change. And the whole purpose of that conference is to try to start having this conversation on a grander level to see where it goes and what might come of it. And we joked when we were talking about it, George Pransky, for those of you who know him, is one of the people doing it with us. And he said, "This feels so good." He goes, "It feels like a coming out party." And he says, because I've always felt like, if these principles were understood on a wider scale, there'd be some major global changes that would happen. But I didn't realize it till sitting here right now that I never felt like I could just say that. And I want to just say that. And I was like, yeah, exactly. I want to just say that and see what happens.
Well, I'm sitting here laughing at the fact that my last book was called The Inside Out Revolution. And maybe I meant it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is what we're talking about is an inside out revolution. We're talking about the world changing not as an act of force, but as an act of understanding. That's kind of cool. What else you got? Yeah, Steve, can we get a microphone up here?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Stu, and I'm one of the participants on the Super Coach Academy. For those that don't know me, and when we started tonight, or at some stage during this evening, you asked us to raise our hands if we felt fairly daunted about making big, significant changes in the world, or something like that, or the state of the world. And it just occurred to me there that, in our small way, what if everybody that's done the Supercoach Academy, or that's here 2016, that we could do something, take on something in the world, collectively, what would that be like? And we just don't know until we step into that. We could just all sit down and go away and say, wasn't it great in New York? Or we could say, what are we really up for? What might be possible if we stepped into that unknown? It might be scary. And beyond that, what might occur? That's just what comes up for me.
Well, there's something for me about, I think ideas ripen. I think sometimes you have an idea too early. It's not quite ready to be acted on. And then you can leave an idea too long. It kind of rots on the vine. But there is a certain point where an idea is right. You know, it's like, what was it to Orson Welles? We shall drink no wine before it's time, right? We should, but once it's time, you'll know because you'll be doing it already. You'll be stepping forward into it. You'll be exploring it. You'll be playing with it. You might start down one road and go, no, that's not it. But that's okay, because another road will appear. Another thought will appear. Another possibility or opportunity will appear. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes about this is from Marianne Williamson. A lot of people know her for "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, it's that we are powerful beyond measure." That's not actually my favorite quote of hers. My favorite quote of hers is, "God heard us. He sent help. He sent you." And I just think that that's kind of a cool thing to ponder. Well, why not me? Why not now?
Michael actually showed at a conference we were at a couple years ago that video, How to Start a Movement. And it's the person dancing at a music festival by themselves, and he's going nuts. He's just like having the time of his life. And the people go from just kind of watching him and like laughing to suddenly 2 or 3 join. And then slowly the entire music festival moves over to where this one guy had been dancing like crazy by himself. And they start kind of like, I don't know, maybe he's a little too crazy, but I kind of like the crazy. I think I'm going to go check it out for a minute. And then eventually, you know, it's a mass movement. And I really do feel like it is that simple. It's like, yeah, let's walk in that direction and see what happens. It's like, okay, it was me and Michael. Now it's me, Michael, and Stu. Okay, who else we got?
Hey.
Yeah, let's go crazy dance.
We could call it the crazy dance.
Well, and that's, you know, another one of my favorite quotes. Those who danced were thought insane by those who could not hear the music. Right? It's a very different thing to try and make people dance than it is to play music, to speak to it, to speak to the possibility. And those that hear the music will dance. And they'll dance in a perfect way for that music as it comes up in them, not in the pattern that I have decided that one should dance to the music. Right? That's why this can happen, because there's no outside-in imposition. There's no required way to do it that doesn't really suit you, but if you try really hard, you can make it less uncomfortable. Your way of changing the world will be a way that unfolds beautifully from inside you, so beautifully that it's as if it was designed for you. Now, I have no idea whether or not it is designed for us, but when you start to hear the music, when you start to follow what comes up from that infinite well, things unfold as if by design. You run into the King of Prussia. I don't think Prussia still exists. But, but you run into the perfect person to have this conversation with. I was out on the street last night. I was out in the streets last night. But no, I was walking home from dinner and I ran into a friend who I knew in New York in 2009 who lives in Ohio. Right? Who knows how it works? But we all kind of know it works. And when we're open to it, it's a hell of a ride. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Martin. One thing that just occurred to me is there is a big difference in changing the world so that I can live in it, because I don't like it, so I'll go and change it, and feeling good, being okay, and then feeling motivated to do something. I've seen people starting war on drugs or terrorism. It has never led to anything good. But here I see a potential. If I'm feeling good, I feel, I can go and try. Yeah. Feels different.
We don't need to declare war on 48. Because that's essentially what that is. Saying, hey, here's this phenomenon, let's demonize it. Well, okay. I mean, we were talking earlier about how in some things there is a necessary rebalancing on the planet, right? At a certain level of understanding, people don't get treated the same. My daughter and I were talking about this morning. Mara and I were talking about this morning. So at that level where it really looks like that's what's going on, well, okay, let's find parity. Let's try and change it at that level. But at a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of understanding, we get younger in our outlook. At a higher level of consciousness, we get like my godson, who his parents tried to explain racism to him last week, and he could not get it for the life of him. He was like, so wait. So if my skin is a different color, I'm better? What if my eyes are a different color? What if my hair is, like, he couldn't get his head around it. That's the direction of travel. I'm not saying we can't address it at all sorts of practical levels. Of course we can. But it doesn't change at those levels. The transformation happens in the seeing. And the funny thing is, we've learned the seeing that's messed up. Like that wasn't a factory preset. I'm about to sing a song from South Pacific, stop me. But you have to be carefully taught. Right? Reference for people over 50. But it's true that it's not a given. That, there's always going to be racism. There's always going to be sexism. There's always going to be this. Not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. We have to maintain that. We have to keep that going in our heads and then teach other people to do it in their heads. Now, none of us probably in this room would do that on purpose. But if we're not looking at what's getting created over here, we got no idea what's getting created over there. And that's the integrity of it. I only have to worry about this bit. I have to worry about that bit, because as this bit changes, somehow, and this is way beyond my understanding, but you talk about it too, somehow when it changes over here, it changes over there. It's the damnedest thing. Somehow when I settle down, other people settle down too. Somehow when it stops looking horrifying and terrifying to me, a lot less people are horrified and terrified. I don't get that part of the equation, but I see it all the time. And that's kind of cool too. Like, oh, okay, I can just worry about this bit? All right. Yeah, I can do this bit. Like, I can do this bit. Fine. But it is, like, it's fine. It's fine that I get scared sometimes. It's fine that I can get scared of Paris too. Right? I can watch the news and I can scare myself rigid. But I don't think I'm still going to be scared tomorrow. And I don't think I'm scared of something real. So I don't even have to be brave. I don't even have to be fearless. I can just know what's going on. And if I know what's going on, I can take it into account. And if I take it into account, I'm going to do pretty well. And I'm certainly going to do a hell of a lot better than if I think it's coming at me.
Yeah, it's just gotten really curious, and because it's so clear to me, well, if it really is, like I've looked at, and I really encourage people to experiment with this for fun, or at least I think of it as fun, but it's like, I can't come up with anything that I currently see in the world that wouldn't get solved if people understood two things. One, that their experience wasn't coming from outside of them. And two, that they have infinite potential for new thought. I can't think of a single thing in the world that wouldn't get addressed if those two pieces were clearly understood. And it's easier than it looks. It's like if you're really willing to consider that something could be that simple, part of our problem is we dismiss it. Instantly we just, oh, it's more complicated than that. Okay, well, how's it going with that whole dealing with the complicated thing? Yeah, not so hot. I noticed that. So anyway, if you're willing to consider that maybe it could be this simple, I would love to see what would happen if people were like, what if it was that simple? And what if it's not that hard to show people that? Because I'm not that brilliant and I'm not that slick and I do it for a living and it's working. And I really mean that. I'm not being sarcastic here. Like, I'm not even that good at talking about this. And yet, if I hang out with people for 2 to 3 days, something happens where they go, you know, there's really something to this. As I said, Jan started by saying, that's bullshit. 2 days later, he's like, it's actually incredible. It's kind of true. And what he said is when he realized it was true, the first thing that happened for him is he quit living in so much anger. Because he thought his anger was happening to him. Now that he understood what it was made of, he just, as he said, just wasn't getting on those trains as much because he saw them as trains of thought. And then the next thing he said, which was interesting, is, and if I'm not wasting time and energy hanging out in anger, I get a lot more done. Isn't solving problems just people who have the bandwidth to sit around and get some interesting things done? Like, wouldn't that energy miracle happen if people weren't hanging out so much in frustration and anger and bottlenecks and bureaucracy, and we're so good at looking what's in our way and getting on that train and getting angry and frustrated about it. And to hear Jan say, oh, well, it's interesting because first it looked like bullshit, then it looked really helpful, and now I notice I'm not as angry, and because I'm not as angry, I'm getting a lot more done. That's a really simple equation in my mind that gets to a different number outcome. And that's not because I'm a genius that taught Jan, who's also a genius, some complicated formula. It was really simple. It was two humans sitting down and going, let's look at how the system really works. Let's look at how the human mind actually creates its experience and see if there's anything new or free or helpful in that. And boom.
How smart do you have to be to see the clock on the wall? Right? How good at pointing do you have to be to get people to see the clock on the wall? Unless they're behind that pillar, in which case you have to be a little bit better than I am. Right? The reason is that the clock is there. It's already there. Right? We're talking about something that is already true. And that's why people can see it. And often they can see it quite quickly. And once they see it, they start to move in a different world.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because what I think where we're coming to is a very, well, to me at least, clear understanding that the whole thing is even easier than that. The world really doesn't need changing. So we don't even need 2 hours, really, right?
I like where you're headed.
I do too, but I've got to justify our fee.
I just like looking at you guys, you know, that was worth it. But seriously, the higher the more understanding we have, right, and the more conscious we become, whichever way it takes, either madly falling in love with another human being, and getting enlightened, whatever, right? At the end of the day, what really happens is that when I clear up, the world is already good. Right? And it's beautiful.
And there's a simplicity to the actions that we take in that world. Right? When the lion comes to us with a thorn in his paw, we take the thorn out of his paw.
Right.
Right? Not so that we'll have an ally in a future battle, but because there's a lion with a thorn in his paw, man. That's got to hurt. Right? It doesn't mean we're going to ignore pain and suffering. In fact, it means we've got the bandwidth to deal with the pain and suffering. Because we're not all up in our own pain and suffering. I mean, it really is. I remember when I first started to see this, I'd gone up and my business partner had said, okay, you go and learn what these people are talking about so that we can figure out what they're doing to make people change so quickly. And I came back and he said, did you find it? Did you figure out the magic trick? Did you find the secret formula? And I said, dude, I am so sorry. I drank the Kool-Aid. It's actually true. Like it did not occur to me that there was something more useful than trying to find something useful. That there's actually just something true about the human mind, about the human potential, that when you see it, you get more of it. You get to walk in an easier world. You get to live in a friendlier world. And then it keeps, because new thought keeps coming. And you keep seeing more. And new opportunities come and new possibilities to affect the world. More lions come by with sore paws. More, you stumble across more things where you actually can help. And the world begins to change. And it isn't just me, it isn't just Mara, it isn't just Stu. Right? It starts to happen as you see more, as you start to see, oh, God, that's just my thinking too. God, I'm making that up too? Oh, that's great.
And can I sort of like ask, so if that's the case, is even framing it as changing the world counterproductive?
Got you here. I'm not even kidding. That's the conversation people are in. So that's a decent frame to begin to have the conversation in, from my point of view.
But I love what you're saying.
I do too, but it evolves.
When you see that, like it's just funny because, again, you can see that the individual is global as individual and back again. Like they're not really separate things. So it's change yourself, will change the world, will change you. Like it's all one thing. And I loved how simply you put it and how clearly you obviously see that. And that's magical because it's exactly the same as when I saw, oh, New York City isn't the problem. It's that in different thinking, I make it look like New York is the problem. And the second I go with that, I start having to do all these things that I think I need to change out there. I gotta move somewhere else and I gotta, get a different job where I don't have to be traveling all the time between New York and London. And then I gotta do this and then I gotta do that. And it's like, yeah, the list goes on and on out there. Whereas, and again, it's just seeing that that's the same is me seeing that for me about my life. I don't need to change anything out there. I know that now. Like Michael said, once I saw the clock, I was like, oh yeah, that is there. You're right. Once I saw like New York is not the problem. New York is never going to be the problem. So you don't have to waste your time trying to change the world of New York. And that's the same for everything else we're dealing with. I really do feel like once people get that piece that you're talking about, will all change. And it'll just be a different world. Absolutely.
I work with kids and the work I do with them is creative and collaborative challenges. And it's amazing what they can come up with in very, very short period of time. I kid you not, like some of those ideas can be taken without any change and, go into production. And what occurred to me is that the reason why we're not getting better answers is because we're not asking the question in the right frame. Because you see what they're doing? They're playing. They're playing. They're not solving the problem. They are not changing the world. They are playing. And it's mind-blowing what comes out of them.
And I think it's so, to Michael's point about that going back to the infinite well is getting curious. Like Lauren, my friend, essentially said, I'm going to do an experiment. No one told her, you shouldn't produce any trash. She was like, I wonder if I could do this. And that wonder is basically says, okay, I know I had my old thinking. I know I used to think this way about life. I used to wake up and take this and then throw that in the trash and do like everything we do, every behavior we do is preceded by the way we think about things right now. All behavior comes from thought. So you get curious about, could it be different? And then you can get very playful.
Yeah, I'm going to, okay, so this will be my little close and then you can have your own little close.
Yes.
So I'm going to invite you to join the world's weirdest movement. And what I mean by that is because there's kind of nothing to join.
You will receive no newsletters. There will be no meetings.
There are no dues. And hell, if you want to be president, it's all yours.
Yep, let's go for it.
Because essentially, it's a movement inwards. It's a movement towards this infinite well within the mind, towards this not yet created in the mind, towards this space within that thought comes through, the fresh-baked cookies of the mind. And if you are willing to make that movement, you'll see what comes out there starts to move. And that would really be the only movement necessary, from my point of view, for the world to change. And that's a movement that you make within you, and it might look different to you than to me, than to Mary, than to Mara, than to Dominic, but it will have a quality to it. It will have a quality of the infinite well. It will have a quality of higher thought. And that flavor will flavor everything that comes of it. And so that would be my invitation. Join the movement, man.
The only thing I would add in closing to that, I'm really glad you said it because it reminded me of one other thing that I think is critical. And this really stems from something very personal for me, which is that the nicest thing about joining this movement is you don't have to believe in anything. You can keep believing in what you already believe in. You can keep doing what you're already doing. If you're religious, you can be religious. If you're into yoga or meditation, you can do yoga or meditation. If you're into playing like death metal really loud in your ears, you can do that. Like, I don't care what you do because this isn't about what you do or what you believe in. It comes one step before that, which I feel like makes it the great equalizer. Universal. And I've worked with prominent rabbis, I've worked with Mormons, I've worked with people of every different slant of profession, background, socioeconomic, religious, you name it. And when they've taken a look, they've gone, yeah, actually, it makes total sense. It doesn't push up against humans. It just describes humans. It describes how you even have a religion or how you have a yoga practice or what happens to you when you decide to sit down and meditate. It's just explanatory. It's not prescriptive. And there's something really powerful about people seeing something that's universally true for all of humanity that explains us all the same and doesn't make us have to change who we are or what we believe in. And that's why I believe in this as a movement more than anything, because I was raised in a family that was like, movements are for losers and anything institution I hate. And if you're a religion, get out of my face. I mean, it was just, I was raised by a very strong personality father that was very like, I'm not interested in anyone else telling me how to live my life or how I should think. And when he learned this, he changed. because it didn't push up against that feeling in him. It allowed him to keep being him, but see something more fundamental about the essence of where his experience came from that allowed him to be a different father, that allowed us to have a different family feeling and got me interested in this. So I'm like, dude, if you can help that guy, I'm telling you, you can help anybody. And I really do. And I say that I'm joking about my dad, sort of, but it's also because I've worked with so many different people from so many different walks of life. And literally, I've had rabbis say to me, all this does is make me feel more connected to my faith and more connected to my family and more connected to life. And I love the neutrality of that. And I think there's so much hope in that because I personally have yet to come across anything else that is that neutral and yet so powerful. So thanks for coming. Join the movement.
Join the movement, man.